My name is Rachel Rofe. I created the show because I wanted to help you see that if you have a choice, you can choose a better life. If you're listening to this podcast, you're in a pretty fortunate position. You have free will, ability to connect to the internet, and access to all kinds of new education. This podcast is meant to help you make the most of your good fortune. We talk with all kinds of people here from all walks of life because I want you to see that no matter what your situation, there's always a way to create a life that you're proud of. Hello everyone, today we're here with Hadley Gustin. Hadley is the creator of Come As You Are Evolution, a revolution for those who identify with, quote, incurable, end quote, anxiety, ADD/ADHD, and panic disorder, also known as energy-sensitive people. Her mission is to guide those who are energy sensitive to create instant calm and comfort in their bodies so that they can impact the world on a massive scale using their greatest personal talents and gifts. As a teacher, speaker, and coach, Gustin is the first of her kind to innovatively spark global understanding and excitement around the concept of energy sensitivity. Serving as a role model and guide for over 1.4 billion energy-sensitive people around the world, her message is, there's nothing wrong with you and everything right with you. Your time to create ease in your body and epicness in the world is now. Hadley is a board-certified holistic health professional, a member of the International Association for Health Coaches, and an integrative nutrition health coach. She resides in New York City and can be reached online at comeasyouareevolution.com. And I actually didn't know Hadley until a few days ago. First, her publicist reached out and just asked about introducing Hadley and I to each other. And I heard about the concept of energy sensitivity, and I was interested immediately because I definitely identify myself as energetically sensitive, and I know so many other people do too. So that was really awesome. And then actually, Hadley and I talked the other day. We had recorded a podcast, and then I uploaded it, and it didn't end up uploading it. I thought that it had been already uploaded, so I deleted it, and here we are having take 2 of our conversation. And I'm even more confident now we're going to have a great interview because we had such a great one last time. So this will be real fun. So Hadley, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. Yeah, that's right. We talked last week, but I'm excited to talk again. I know we're going to have a fabulous conversation today.
Awesome. So the way that we start every show, as you intimately know, is just letting people know that if they have a choice, the intention of the show is to show people if they have a choice, they can choose a better life. So in that spirit, can you just take a moment to share with us some of the things that you're most proud of in your life right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on the surface, I would say the stuff I'm going to share is probably right up about things that people would go, how could you possibly be proud of that? But I really am, and in the way that it's all played out for me thus far, I would say the first thing is several years ago, I made the decision to leave college midway through, and it was the first major decision I think that I made that kind of went off track of what the mainstream typical way to go is for somebody who's 19, 20 years old. What was even more interesting was that I left school at a point when I was getting straight A's and, had a lot of academic awards, and it really didn't make sense to most people because they were like, well, what are you doing? You're basically throwing your whole future away, and doing so in a way that most people didn't understand because, like I said, I was doing so well, and the idea of if you're leaving college or leaving school or that way of life would be, you must be failing. And that wasn't my story at all, but I'm immensely proud of it because, like I said, it was the first major decision that I made for myself, not really knowing where it would take me or where it would lead, but I just had such a nudge to do it because I was very uninspired by my college experience thus far. I just want to preface what I'm about to say by saying that I don't speak for everybody when I say this. This is just my experience. But like I said, I was very uninspired by it, and because that was the case for me, I knew that it would be in my best interest to leave, save money, work, doing something in the meantime, but really just taking the time to figure myself out and what I wanted to do, the work I wanted to do in the world, how I was going to be creative, how I was going to be serving my interests and my needs and just my yearning for fulfillment. And I didn't have language around that or vernacular or, anything that I'm describing now. That really wasn't my vocabulary then, but I just had like a gut feeling and a gut knowing. As a result, I pursued a path in holistic health, which again was something that was a complete departure from what I had known and what I was going towards before. I originally was going for a degree in history with a career path, that I wanted to pursue later in international journalism. So it really had nothing to do with health. I did it because, again, really speaking to the fact that I wanted to figure myself out. I had this thing called energy sensitivity that I didn't understand at the time and didn't know was energy sensitivity then. To me, it was just a very severe and chronic anxiety disorder I had dealt with pretty much my entire life, not successfully, and didn't have answers around it. And I wanted to know myself, and I wanted to know how to make myself happy, how to feel calm and comfortable in my body, which I didn't know how to do, and really just get right with that so that I could move forward and do work in the world that I wanted to pursue. In pursuing holistic health, that led me to moving to New York with no job, no money, no place to live, very few connections. Again, a major risk, and one that most people were saying don't do. Can't believe you're doing that. But within a matter of a few weeks, I was able to, I call it manifest, but other people have different words for it. But I was able to manifest my dream job, an amazing apartment with great roommates, fabulous place to live in a beautiful area. Really the life that I wanted, the life of my dreams. And I will say that several months after that, not too far into it, that fell apart again. But, the whole, I guess, theme throughout this entire story that I'm telling right now is just knowing for the first time in my life I could take risks and see them come to fruition very quickly. And, even if they didn't pan out or led to something that I wasn't expecting, I guess building that trust muscle in yourself that you can do it, and ultimately leading yourself to a place where you can know happiness and no fulfillment is really what I would say I'm most proud of.
There's a couple great things that you touched on that I'd love to go into. Obviously, I want to talk about energy sensitivity, but I'm also curious. Just you were saying about how you had the nudge to get out of college, or you had this knowing to go to New York City. How did that feel for you? Like, how did you identify the nudge?
Honestly, recognize it as a quality that I would say a lot of energy sensitive people have, in that you really just don't have the luxury to sit still or be comfortable in a situation of mediocrity, a situation that's unfulfilling to you, or as I called it with college, uninspiring. So for me, that was very much the case. I was in school for a few years, and my entire life I was primed and ready to go to college. School was very much my thing. It was something that I identified with heavily. As I said earlier, I was very successful at it. By the time I left, it didn't fully make sense to me, but it definitely didn't make sense to just about anybody around me. And looking at it from a perspective of, she's doing so well, how could she possibly leave, or why would she leave? But the reality is that I was paying for my education completely on my own and taking out heavy loans to do it. And academically, I wasn't fulfilled. I was of the notion that when I got to college that I would be really challenged, but challenged in a way that was just very motivating and exciting. And I didn't feel that way at all. I didn't know it at the time. I know this very much about myself today, but I'm somebody who's very driven by emotion. I don't say that to be a bad thing at all. I think it's a wonderful thing. And I don't say that to mean, that I make rash decisions or I'm a very chaotic person. Not at all. In fact, completely the opposite. But when something doesn't feel good to me, as opposed to, when I think something's right or wrong, something literally doesn't feel right on the inside, and it's not eliciting the emotions that I want to have on a consistent basis, I now know much more readily so. But then it took, a few years to get to that point. I reached a point where it's like, I'm done. I can't sit in this anymore. And if I stay longer, I risk feeling intense pain and discomfort in my body. I risk just feeling certainly not happy, probably going into a state of depression, just not being able to feel emotionally fulfilled in any capacity. And as a result, I feel disconnected from the world around me and unable to do what I would say is anything of true value. So, when I take these risks, and certainly after leaving college, my life has essentially been a series of taking further and further risks for that purpose of really creating value, helping other people, and, attaining emotional connection and joy for myself. But as risky as it seems on the outside, and certainly moving to New York, with everything completely unknown and uncertain, and that really aided me for a little bit because I'm somebody who loves to have a plan. And, my whole life I was always that way. I found security in having, a system, a plan, a way to go. And when you do something just purely on blind faith, it's really testing everything you have and more. But I think it's one of the most important lessons I've ever learned in my life, if not the most important, because each and every time I go through one of these experiences, and I'm right in the middle of one now, with building a brand new business, it just further shows me every single day, like, you can trust yourself. It may not look pretty, certainly not every single day, but I'll be darned if I don't experience at least moments in my day where I'm like, I'm happy. I'm free. I don't feel limited or tethered to something, confined. And I would say that's my greatest enemy if I had to pinpoint it, is feeling limited, confined, constricted, constrained in any way. That to me is like death. So now I know that's kind of like my anchor and my pinpoint. It's like if I'm feeling any of those things, then I know that whatever it is that I'm doing is not right. And no matter what the risk is otherwise, like I have to go in another direction in order to feel otherwise.
You make some really great points about just identifying like when you're not feeling right and what the payoff is if you listen to yourself and you go in a different direction, even if you have to abandon control, or what the kind of consequences if you don't. And I think for people listening, like I know that not everybody has the luxury to be able to just stop what they're doing and about face, but I think that there's even value in what you're saying, just as far as like if you're listening and you feel unfulfilled in different areas and you know that it's not right, even just starting to take action steps towards getting to another place, I think is really helpful. Do you experience that when you're working with people? Do you have people that want to kind of about face, but it's not realistic to just give up everything real quick?
Definitely. I would say it's probably most people. And again, I'm not saying that that's me all the time. That tends to be me in certain points, I think, when I've like hit the end of my rope, so to speak, going in a certain direction. Yeah, most people today, I think it speaks very heavily to the society we live in. It's very risk averse. And it makes all the sense in the world given certainly recent circumstances with, the economy going the way it is, with a lot of political issues coming to a head. I think a lot of people just feel very unsafe and insecure, certainly when you look to the external world. Risk of any kind, I think people just veer away from. I've seen it in my own life and I've seen it in the lives of people close to me. I'm lucky to live in a family where certainly in recent years, myself and also my mom, my sister, and people very close, loved ones, we've all kind of collectively together become risk takers. We're lucky to have each other that way. But definitely in working with people, other family members and friends, it's not so simple to just, share your experiences and have them relate to you or hear from them that they're in a position to take those risks themselves. So I think it's much more tangible for them and realistic if you kind of make it bite size and do it a step at a time. And just keep coming back to the fact, I think, that you're a living example of it, that there is another way and it's not like out in the ethers, it's not intangible, it's not a dream world, that it does exist and it can exist quite quickly. I often say to people too, especially energy sensitive people and the people that I work with, because of the fact that you're energy sensitive, you're hardwired to really take these risks in your life. And that's what you're built for. Going back to what I said earlier in one of my previous answers, like you really don't have the luxury to sit still in a situation that's confining you, that you feel is in any way mediocre and not serving you. Like all of your buttons will come to a head, will be pushed. And that's really going to lead you hopefully in a direction where you're going to probably have to take some risks, but will ultimately mean you're pursuing what you're meant to do in the world. So I've seen it firsthand in my own life, and I've seen it in the lives of the people I've worked with as well too, who are willing to go there and perhaps take more of those risks, as you had said it about face in their own lives, that the bigger a risk you take, the quicker it happens for you, the quicker what you want comes into your life. Having said that, like I said, it's easier to work with people in a way that's more bite-sized, where it's like you're getting to that point over time, or you're doing one step at a time and you're seeing bite-sized results that correspond. But just know, I would say, it's certainly been my experience thus far, that when you do that, you will definitely still get results. You will definitely still see changes happening in your life. That's no question. But in terms of speed, and that's a lot of what I speak to too in my language that I use, on my website, when I'm speaking in any capacity, is this whole concept of when people want something, certainly if an energy sensitive person wants to feel calm and comfortable in their body in juxtaposition to, the high level of anxiety or ADD or panic disorder that they're feeling in the moment, that they tend to feel consistently, perhaps every day they wake up to that. Yeah, I mean, you better believe they want something immediately and now. My whole perspective on it is that you can get it pretty quickly, but you just have to be willing to put yourself out there in a way that perhaps is very uncomfortable. The great news is you're built for that and you will survive that. So it's really just kind of pointing out, like, which path do you want to go? Do you want it to be kind of incremental over time, or do you want to kind of risk more upfront but see further results quicker, faster?
Got it. Okay, my next question is, just about this whole energy sensitivity, energy sensitive people. Can you tell me exactly what that means to you? And then also let me know how you quantify that 1.4 billion people are energy sensitive?
The easiest way to pinpoint an energy sensitive person today, certainly in the mainstream world, would be to identify somebody who has incurable anxiety, ADD, ADHD, panic disorder, any of these high level mental health issues that certainly exist in the world. There are definitely people who have all three of those things: anxiety, ADD, and panic disorder. The difference between those people and energy sensitive people who perhaps identify as having incurable versions of those things is that anybody with a mental health disorder often finds relief, often finds that it goes away, certainly in some capacity, if they're taking medication, if they are changing their diet, their form of exercise, something in life that they're changing with the help of, let's say, a therapist, a psychologist, a coach. They're seeing positive results that way. But energy sensitive people oftentimes don't find relief, or maybe only find temporary relief in those answers. And they're certainly not finding answers that are deeper, that really speak to who they are, why they experience life the way that they do, how this all came about for them, why they're feeling so much pain and discomfort in their bodies, that just basically came out of nowhere. I find that for people who, the end all be all is that they have anxiety or panic disorder or ADD, that there's an explicable reason, right? There's like a mental pattern, a negative thought pattern. They're worrisome. There's something that they can identify with that it's like, yep, that's going on in my head. Of course, that's like the root cause of what I'm going through. But for an energy sensitive person, I'll use myself as an example right now. That wasn't the case at all. I was always, my entire life, a very extremely optimistic person, perseverant person, resilient person. And it made zero sense to me why, I was thinking that way in my head and approaching my life from that vantage point and not feeling what I thought I should be feeling as a result. In fact, I was feeling the polar opposite. In my mind, I was like, well, I should be having negative thought patterns and worrisome thought patterns to correspond to the way that I'm feeling. And it just didn't match up. That is a huge defining quality of an energy sensitive person. And like I said, that a very mainstream way to identify an energy sensitive person is to find somebody who is saying, the best I can do is call what I have anxiety, ADD, panic disorder, or some other similar mental health issue. But they know better on some level that it's not a mental health issue, whatever it is that they're going through. They perhaps identify with most of the symptoms that you would call anxiety or any of the other ones, but they know it's not because of what's going on in their minds or what they're thinking. They know it's something deeper and perhaps a deeper soul part of themselves, but there's no answers around it. There's no role models, there's no guidance, there's nobody really speaking to it on that level. And so they're kind of just left to go ahead and identify with mental health disorder as their only answer and their only option for seeking a treatment, a cure, a healing modality, something to help them. And it's very painful because it's not hitting the root cause or the root explanation of who you are, but you don't see anything else out there for you. As to what you said earlier, identifying the 1.4 billion people, everything in the literature I read in hearing lectures and speeches and talks from the teachers that I learned about who spoke to energy sensitivity and what it was all about, it was very consistent. The number always came up that roughly 20% of the global population in some capacity is energy sensitive. 20% of the global population today is about 1.4 billion people. There's over 7 billion people right now on the planet. If you took 20% of that, it would roughly come out to about 1.4 billion.
Okay. I originally heard the term energy sensitivity. I immediately kind of correlated it to what I experience. And I'll go over that because my next question after that will be just kind of like, what are some other, I guess, like you mentioned some ways that people would know that they're energy sensitive, and I'm curious, like what other types of energy sensitivity there are. And I know that you have a different one. For me, the way that energy sensitivity occurs is twofold. One, it might be like physical symptoms or taking on other people's emotions is the other one. So it might be like I'm in a coffee shop and I'm in a really good mood and I'm not looking, but some grumpy guy walks in, and all of a sudden I'm feeling really grumpy and I don't understand why. And then I look over and I see this guy with a scowl on his face, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. I've kind of started feeling the way that he feels. Or it might be, this happens especially with my boyfriend, is that if he feels sick, let's say his stomach starts hurting him, then my stomach starts hurting me too. It's crazy. And he used to make fun of me about this, but he started then realizing that it happens to him too, for me. So I know that this is kind of like a nebulous topic, and for those that don't identify with energy sensitivity, might sound crazy. I know that that's how it occurs for me. So can you tell me how it occurs for you, and then also how it occurs for other people?
Thank you so much for bringing that up. People have multiple forms. You were just describing, which is much more of an emotional form of energy sensitivity, something that most people in this realm would call an empath or empathic. Again, really speaking to the fact that you take on other people's emotions and sensations too. That happens to me in some capacity. Certainly, I've grown, I think, into that more. Energy sensitivity is also something that can change for you over time, and it evolves just like about everything else in the world. For me, I tend to feel energy on a much more raw, visceral level, meaning that whether it's emotions coming at me, whether it's energy from circumstances outside myself, something that really gets me every single time, even to this day, is sitting through a thunderstorm is to this day difficult for me. Not as difficult as it was when I was, let's say, 13 years old. I had a much worse reaction to it then, but still, particularly in seeing lightning or looking at lightning, my body automatically jolts and reacts. And I recognize today, now knowing what this is and how to manage it, it's not a fear, it's not an anxiety, it's not a worry, because that's not where it's coming from. I'm sitting there, and if I don't know a storm is coming and all of a sudden I see lightning, like my body just inherently responds, and it's beyond any mental thought or rational thought that I would have. It's just an immediate impulse reaction. And so, like I said, today I'm much more aware of that and how to manage it. But that's, I think, a great way for me to kind of paint the picture of, this other form, let's say, of energy sensitivity, where it's like you're just reacting to this energy, be it emotions or anything else that's outside of yourself. And because essentially everything in the world is energy, and it's housed in different ways in different capacities, whether it's energy from lightning bolts or energy from a human body, it's constantly being put out into the world. And so if you're an energy sensitive person, your body is just a magnet for that. And because every body is different, like Rachel and I are talking about right now, like you're going to react to it in a way that may be different from, the person sitting next to you. But the reality still is, if you are energy sensitive, you will have some kind of reaction or response to it that can seem kind of crazy, right? Like you were saying, if you're sitting next to your boyfriend or somebody else who's got a stomach ache and you pick up on that and you start to have one yourself, it doesn't seem logical, it doesn't seem rational, but it's very much about, feeling and the body, and it really doesn't have this whole mental component around it. It's deeper than that. It can be very physically felt.
Yeah, and you make such a good point about if you don't really know how to identify it, you don't know what you're dealing with, and of course, like people would go and make it kind of a mental thing and think they're making it up because there just isn't like enough vernacular around what we're talking about. So I think you have a really important just message to share with people. And on that note, you were saying that, or in your bio, it talks about how your mission is to guide those who are energy sensitive to create instant calm and comfort in their bodies. So can you tell me, like in that moment, this grumpy man comes in, or in this moment, like you see lightning, what do you do to create that instant calm and comfort?
For me, it really became apparent, especially in New York City, that I needed tools and techniques immediately to, get other people's energy off of me, to get it out of me, and really so that I could be calm and comfortable in my own body. And I really, without even consciously realizing it at the time, went to work on how do I, just on a daily basis, getting up out of bed in the morning and walking outside my door, how do I do that for myself? How do I brush off that energy and instantly, as you said, create that sense of calm, comfort, and ease in my body? I didn't want something that was going to take me an hour to do or a day to do, or, that required that I go and disconnect from the world and unplug and sit in meditation or yoga. And I do those things, don't get me wrong. I do have a regular practice in a lot of that stuff, but it was very important to me that I find a way to live in the mainstream world and apply some sort of tools, techniques, whatever it was that was going to get me through my day and allow me to do it successfully and feel calm and comfortable. So right off the bat, my go-to tools. I have two of them that work great both separately and together. I think together they kind of amplify each other and work even better. But the first tool I use is something called the yours, not mine tool. And so wherever I am, if I'm sitting on the subway, if I'm walking down the street, if I'm sitting in a crowd of people, at an office space, wherever, it works beautifully and it works pretty instantly. And I'll just say in my head, I don't have to say it out loud, but I'll say in an assertive tone. It's important that, I say the word assertive, not aggressively, because aggressively connotates reactive, but assertively kind of coming from your own power, being very empowering and not so much reacting to the outside energy, but just, more so bringing out your own energy and saying yours, not mine. So when I say that very assertively in my head, immediately and I feel it too. It's like this energy that's coming at me bounces off and reflects off my body and goes back to whether it's, the body of another person, it's going back to that bolt of lightning I reacted to, whatever it is, but it's the energy is going back to its source. And it's not going into my body. It's not, going into, another word for body is vessel, my vessel, and causing me pain and discomfort. If you want to call it rejecting it or sending it back. And that allows me to instantly detach from all of this external energy, all of this chaos on the outside, and create that sense of instant ease and calm in my body. And I do. Pretty immediately. I might have a little bit of shaking or twinging to start, but within seconds, I would say even less than a minute, it's like my body just feels light, as if it's just exhaling. Everything's completely at ease. Everything's calm. I think a very important point to make too is that I use these tools consistently, on a daily basis and throughout my day. So it's not like, I say it once and then it's done or it's done forever. No. And I make it a point to say that too, because, energy sensitivity is not something that you cure. It's not something to be healed, because if it were, that would mean that, it's a problem. It's a disorder. It needs to be fixed. And it doesn't at all. It's just a part of who you are. And these are simply tools to manage that on a daily basis. So in addition to the yours, not mine tool, I have another tool that I use regularly that works great too. It's something that I call affectionately the hang out in between your eyes tool. And it's literally where I oftentimes close my eyes, but you can keep them open too, either way. I will just make it a point to, in any given moment, say, I'm just going to hang out right in between my eyes. It's as if I'm focusing and fixating all of my attention, all of my energy on this one point right in between my eyes. And if I close them, I oftentimes find that it has an even quicker effect. But again, they don't need to be closed. And in that moment, it's like all of the energy from my body, everything that's currently there, just sucks up to that one point. An energy up from my head, it comes all the way down. Everything draws to that one point in between my eyes. And it's like the rest of my body is suspended in thin air. It just feels weightless. And to me, that is everything. That is like ultimate freedom, because I no longer feel limited, constricted, constrained, or confined by my own body. It gives me that ultimate sense of freedom, which is what I'm after, and pretty instantaneously too. So if I do those two tools together, even, like I said earlier, it really amplifies the effect even more so, but they work great apart too, either way. And I found that those two things just really make a huge difference right away.
So a couple of things just that I want to touch on. One of them is that tool, especially that first tool that you mentioned. I can really see how that would be super helpful, because our minds are so powerful, and I feel like we have the ability to kind of just move energy with our minds. I know one tool that I used to do that really helped, and I'm glad we're even talking about this because I need to reintroduce it. Whenever I would notice that I started to pick up somebody else's either emotions or physical symptoms or whatever it is, I would just imagine like my roots kind of connected to the center of the earth. So I'd make this image of like some kind of chain or rope or just whatever happened to come up. And then I would just imagine that center of the earth just pulling away anything that wasn't mine. And when I did it, just within seconds, I would just start to feel like, whew, I'm just getting back to me. I'm just getting back to me. And it's so helpful. So I totally get how your tool works too. And I think that's very, very helpful, because you're right. It is something that's instant for people. And obviously, as you said, the more you practice, the easier it will get for you.
Yeah, and I think it's important too. I definitely say this as often as I can to people, that the way that I came about these tools was really in taking what I had learned from other people. It's as if I had heard you just describing the tool that you said works so well for you, which is fantastic. It's as if I just heard that and kind of tweaked it and played with it for myself and found out a way to make it work for me, and pretty instantaneously. So that's what I say to people is, look, if you're finding that these tools that I just described aren't working for you right away, for whatever reason, please don't think there's anything wrong with you, or, there's not even really anything wrong with the tools. It's just a matter of what I said a little bit earlier, that every single body is different and responds differently to energy and to these different tools and techniques. So it's really just a matter of you crafting a way that is going to work best for you. And whether that means you tweak the tool a little bit or you invent one all your own, whatever works best for you. But I think that's so essential, because I definitely, in going through several different iterations of therapy growing up and just seeing different professionals who gave me their tools and, all their stuff, and it was never ever working for me. I think a lot of times people just walk away from that and go, wow, there must be something really wrong with me that, nothing's working. And I think it's just really important to say there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. It's just a matter of finding it and continuing to keep an open mind about what will work for you, and having that willingness to play around with it.
The other thing that you had said earlier that I wanted to comment on was how you said it doesn't mean that there's anything to be diagnosed with you if you have energy sensitivity, or there's something that needs to be cured, because there's nothing wrong with it. I remember when you said that my particular form of it is just the empath. For sure, like I took the strength finders, my number one thing was empathy, my number one strength. And definitely I can see there's things with it that are hard, for sure. But then also there's duality to everything. So on my side with empathy, I think the other side of it is just being able to be really good in business, because I can relate to people. A lot of marketing is all about solving problems for people and making people feel like that you understand them. And empathy is obviously amazing for that. And so the things that you're talking about too, there's pros for that too. So I think a lot of people who are energy sensitive, they pay attention to all the things that it hinders them with, but it's also just such an incredible gift. And I feel like a lot of CEOs and major business people have this energy sensitivity, because if you can harness it, it's just a huge strength.
Absolutely. Ultimately, with everything that I do is that, like you said, energy sensitivity, it's not a diagnosis. It's not a problem to be fixed, and it certainly means that there's nothing wrong with you and everything right with you. You have a tremendous, tremendous gift. But oftentimes with gifts, the ones of the deepest kind, they can be very misunderstood, because on the surface they create, or oftentimes can create, pain and discomfort. And we certainly live in a society where we're told that just about anything you feel pain and discomfort from is bad, and it needs to be fixed like yesterday. In understanding energy sensitivity, it's really this whole paradigm shift of looking at it in a way that goes, no, there's nothing wrong here. You don't need to pop a pill. You don't even need a modality per se to fix this, because it's not a problem to be fixed. It's just a gift that, as you were saying earlier, Rachel, like when you understand it and you can harness it, it really has unlimited potential to impact the world in a massive way. And that's why we're here. Energy sensitive people, they're our greatest healers. They're our greatest teachers and guides and compassionate people. We need them to, transform any of the, the corruption and the misdoings and the competition, any kind of energy in this world that exists today that's not in everyone's highest good and interest. That's why energy sensitive people are here to really figure that out and transition it into a new point in time where we can all enjoy, an abundance of peace and prosperity for each other, and not experience any suffering that doesn't need to be. So it is. And I would agree with you 100%. Your empathy is so useful and so impactful in the way that you do business and marketing and reaching people. And I think it's a huge reason why you're so successful.
Well, thank you very much. And the last thing I would like to ask you, just for those listening, you said 20% of people are energy sensitive. My suspicion actually is that there's more than 20%, but that's neither here nor there. What I'm mostly curious about is for people who are listening and maybe they don't identify with energy sensitivity and they know people in their lives who are, or maybe they think certain people are, do you have any tips on how they can best relate to them, especially in the context of, from my experience, one of the things is like anger or like really hard emotions can like super affect me. And I know that there's all different kinds of things for different people, but like for just people who don't identify with energy sensitivity, knowing that people have such reactions to things, what are some things they can do just to be supportive of people?
It's a great question. I would also do in saying that I do believe that it's a greater number, 20%, that exists out there today who are energy sensitive. I just personally can't prove it right now, so I stick with the more conservative numbers. But it's a great conversation to have for anybody, whether you are energy sensitive or not, of, how to deal with it on a daily basis, because I think conversation and storytelling truly are so important. It's what connects us all, whether you are energy sensitive or not. It's such an important point of relation and how we build relationships and how we build businesses and how we build ideas and so on and so forth. But, going off of that point we were just talking about with energy sensitivity, again, there's nothing wrong with you and everything right with you. And if you know somebody in your life who is energy sensitive, first and foremost, if you can find a way to just send them that message, whether you say it out loud to them, I personally think that you can never say that one phrase enough, whether it's to an energy sensitive person or otherwise. Let's be honest, in this world today, most people are walking around with something, some kind of burden on the inside that makes them feel like there's this huge fundamental flaw with them. Just firmly believe you can never hear enough. There's nothing wrong with you and everything right with you. I think it changes everything, and it really opens up the door for people who hear that message to just move forward and create whatever it is that they want to create. So I think, having a conversation around that, just really, my mom, I remember having this conversation with my mom fairly recently where it was like, if we could find a way to treat energy sensitive people like we do in comparison today in the world today, people who are gluten-free, let's say, it's become so common anymore that you hear the phrase gluten-free. And if somebody walks into a restaurant and requests a gluten-free dish, most people don't bat an eyelash at it. If we could find a way to, essentially do that for energy sensitive people, where it's like, in my case, if I'm sitting in the middle of a thunderstorm and I want to close, the blinds or close the windows, most people still to this day, because it's a whole new concept, we're talking about your energy sensitivity and getting it out into the mainstream. Most people today are going to look at me like, wow, there's something wrong with you. What are you afraid of? And you need help. But the reality is I'm just doing it so that I can manage my own reactivity and so that I can sit there and have a more peaceful, calm experience. And knowing for myself, there is nothing wrong with me. So, same circumstance, if somebody in your life, let's say, has a real issue with thunderstorms and it's for that reason and they ask, to close the blinds, find it in your capacity to make that be okay. I think the more we can do that in general with people, start to look at each other from a place of, oh, that's just another side to you. That's just another part of you, but it's not wrong. The more we can make each other right and not look for the flaws, which is easier said than done. And I think it's just a natural part of human nature. I think that's the greater message, is just try to bring more consciousness around the fact that it's not necessarily wrong. Certainly if it's not hurting anybody else or hurting yourself, it's just another part of life. And that's completely okay. And the more we talk about it and bring it out into the open and not let it fester on the inside of yourself or anybody else, where it's going to naturally create suffering, that's not only beneficial for you and the people in your life, but for the entire world. And you're setting a great example that way.
So you have brought so many awesome points here. I feel like especially people who identify as energy sensitive are going to feel such relief at hearing some of the things you said. And I'm actually kind of glad that the first one got deleted, because I feel like this interview is way better. Do you feel like that too?
Thanks for saying that. No, yeah, I love the conversation. And yeah, for whatever reason today, I just feel like more of these great points came through from both yourself and myself. So that's fantastic.
Totally. I agree. I would love if you could just let people know where they can go to learn more about you.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in learning more about me, my company, what it is that I do, please feel free to go ahead to my website, which is comeasyouareevolution.com. Again, that's come, C-O-M-E, as A-S-U-Y-O-U-R-A-R-E, evolution.com. You can also find me on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and absolutely, certainly if you go on my website, you'll find my email address. Please feel free to contact me, reach out to me at any time, and I will do my best to respond.
All right. Well, thank you again, Hadley.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I had a great time.
Me too.
Thank you so much for listening to A Better Life. You can find all show notes for this episode at rachelrofay.com. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe so you can automatically get access to all new shows. Let's also connect. Just go onto Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram /Rachel Rofay, and we can talk there. The opinions of all guests here are their own, and I'm not necessarily endorsing any of them. I do want to give you perspective, though.